You feel it too, right? You wake up, you check the updates from the NFL Combine, and instead of hearing that the San Francisco 49ers are aggressively targeting offensive line help, you hear that they might actually be content. And I've got to be honest with you, that should concern you. Right now, all the buzz coming out of the Combine is that the 49ers, as an organization, don't see their offensive line as a major problem. John Lynch publicly defended the group. He talked about loyalty. He talked about belief. He talked about how much they love their guys. And look, loyalty is great. Culture is great. Belief is great. But winning a Super Bowl requires more than belief. It requires dominance in the trenches. When Lynch was asked about the perception that the offensive line isn't good enough, he pushed back. He praised Trent Williams as one of the greatest to ever do it. He defended Colton McKivitz. He complimented Jake Brendel. He talked up the draft finds. And that's where this whole conversation starts. Because if the front office truly believes this group is championship caliber, then we have to ask ourselves something uncomfortable. Are we watching the same games? You and I have seen what happens when this offensive line goes up against elite defensive fronts. We've seen the pocket collapse. We've seen interior pressure wreck drives. We've seen Brock Purdy running for his life. And yet, the message from the building is, we're good. That's the disconnect. The 49ers' philosophy under Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch has always leaned toward prioritizing skill position players over offensive linemen early in the draft. They've said it. Even their own offensive line coach has acknowledged it. They love playmakers. They love guys who can score touchdowns. But here's the hard truth. The teams that consistently win in January and February build from the inside out. Elite general managers prioritize the trenches. Offensive line, defensive line. That's where games are. Won when the margin for error shrinks. To their credit, the 49ers have absolutely invested in the defensive line over the years. That side of the ball has been a focus. But when it comes to the offensive line, especially the interior, it feels like an afterthought. And here's where I want you involved. Do you trust this offensive line as currently built? Yes or no? Be honest. If the season started tomorrow, would you feel confident watching this group protect your $55 million a year quarterback against the Eagles, the Seahawks, or the Chiefs? Drop your answer in the comments. I want to know exactly where you stand. Because this isn't about being negative. This isn't about hating on players. This is about accountability and championship standards. And if you're new here, make sure you subscribe right now. We're pushing toward 2,000 subscribers, and this channel is about year-round 49ers coverage. No sugarcoating, no blind optimism, just real conversations for the faithful. Now here's where it gets more serious. Because once you move past the philosophy, once you move past the public praise, the actual evidence from the biggest games tells a much different story. And that's what we're diving into next. Good, because now we have to talk about the part nobody inside the building seems eager to address, the evidence. It's one thing to say you believe in your guys. It's another thing to watch what happens when those guys line up against elite defensive fronts in the biggest moments. Think about the Seahawks. Not just one game, not just a fluke loss. We're talking about 8 quarters to close the year where the 49ers didn't score a single touchdown against them. 8 quarters. And what was the common theme? They got bullied up front. They couldn't run the ball consistently. They couldn't hold up in pass protection. The interior of the pocket kept collapsing. And when interior pressure shows up, that's the worst kind for a quarterback, especially for Brock Purdy. Interior pressure doesn't give you an escape lane. It doesn't give you a clean step-up window. It muddies everything. It forces off-platform throws. It speeds up your clock. It changes your mechanics. And we're talking about a quarterback you just committed $55 million per year to. That's the part that doesn't add up. If you're investing that kind of money in Brock Purdy, shouldn't the number one priority be keeping him upright? Now let's talk about Jake Brendel specifically, because this isn't personal. This is production. Over the last 3 seasons, He's given up 29 pressures, ranking 30th among centers. Then 26 pressures, ranking 37th. Then 23 pressures, ranking 31st. That's not middle of the pack. That's not solid starter territory. That's near the bottom of the league. Yes, he fits the scheme. Yes, he's smart. Yes, he can move in the run game. But when he's facing elite defensive tackles, he gets pushed back. And when he gets pushed back, Brock Purdy is dealing with a defender in his lap before roots can even develop. You can love a player and still admit he's not championship caliber in pass protection. And here's the bigger issue. It's not just one game. It's not just Seattle. Go back to the NFC Championship against the Rams. Aaron Donald breaks through and ends the game. Go back to the Eagles' playoff matchup when their defensive line overwhelmed the 49ers. Go back to the Super Bowl against Kansas City when Chris Jones comes free on a crucial play because of a protection breakdown. Every time the lights get brightest, the trenches become the story. Now zoom out. The NFC isn't getting easier. Seattle isn't falling apart. The Eagles are still built through the trenches. The Cowboys added defensive talent. The conference is loaded with pass rushers. And what did John Lynch say the top off-season focus is? Defensive line. Now look, the defense needs help too. They were last in sacks. Getting healthy will matter. But if you're asking me what's more urgent, helping Nick Bosa or protecting Brock Purdy? It's protecting your quarterback. Let me ask you this straight up. Is center the biggest problem on this offensive line? Or do you think right tackle is more urgent? Drop it in the comments. Center or right tackle? And here's another one. If the 49ers use their first-round pick, would you be upset if it's an offensive lineman? Because for me, if they don't invest early in the trenches this year, they're gambling with their Super Bowl window. Now, the interesting part is this. It's not just fans saying this. It's not just media narratives. Some respected football minds are looking at this roster and saying something even more drastic, and what they're suggesting might shock you. That's where we're going next. Because when you start hearing this from people who break down film for a living, it hits differently. I caught up with Brett Coleman, someone who studies offensive and defensive line play as closely as anybody in the football space. And when we started talking about the 49ers' offensive line, especially the interior, his reaction said everything before he even finished the sentence. He basically said you could argue that 80% of this offensive line should be replaced. 80%. Let that sink in. Now, that doesn't mean they're a bad football team. They won games. They were competitive. They didn't stumble into double-digit wins by accident. But when you're talking about the difference between good and championship level, that gap matters. Brett wasn't panicking about the defense. He wasn't screaming about wide receiver depth. His biggest concern? Offensive line, tight end depth, protecting the quarterback. And he made another key point. As long as the talent gap between the 49ers' interior offensive line and teams like Seattle up front remains as wide as it is, the outcome won't change. That's the part that should keep you up at night. Then you listen to John Middlecoff, who's spent years around front offices and coaches, and he flat out disagrees with the 49ers' philosophy of prioritizing skill players over linemen. He pointed out something simple but powerful. Organizations like Philadelphia don't think that way. Howie Roseman builds through the trenches every single year. It's almost a lock that he'll draft another offensive lineman early. And what have the Eagles done twice since 2017? Won 2 Super Bowls. That's not coincidence, that's philosophy. Meanwhile, the 49ers keep trying to win on the margins with mid-tier interior linemen, hoping scheme and coaching will close the gap against elite pass rush units. Sometimes it works in the regular season. It doesn't work when you're facing a defensive front with 4 guys who can all win one-on-one. Now, before we keep going, I need to talk to you directly, faithful. If you love real, honest 49ers coverage, no fluff, no blind loyalty, just championship standards, help us grow this community. We're pushing toward 2,000 subscribers, and every single subscription moves us closer. Hit that subscribe button right now if you haven't already. And if you really want to fuel this channel and fuel the quest for the next Super Bowl trophy, use the Super Thanks or Hype feature below. That's not a donation. That's you investing in better production, deeper breakdowns, and building something special for the faithful. Every bit of support goes right back into making this show bigger and better for you. Now let me ask you something important. Do you agree with Brett? Is this offensive line that far off from being championship caliber, or do you think we're overreacting? Be real with me in the comments. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. If the 49ers don't adjust this philosophy, if they keep assuming scheme can outsolve talent gaps in the trenches, we're going to keep having the same conversation every January. And that brings us to the part that's hardest to hear. The evidence isn't theoretical. It's already happened. And this is where it stops being a debate and starts being a pattern. Go back to the 2021 NFC Championship game against the Rams. The season ends with Aaron Donald breaking through the line of scrimmage and forcing the mistake that seals it. That wasn't some exotic coverage. That was a dominant defensive lineman winning at the point of attack when it mattered most. Fast forward to the Eagles' playoff matchup the following year. That Philadelphia defensive front was relentless. 70 sacks that season, 15 more than anyone else in the league. They didn't just beat the 49ers, they overwhelmed them up front. The pocket never felt stable. The protection never felt firm. The game flipped because the trenches flipped. Then think about the Super Bowl against Kansas City. One critical moment. One protection breakdown. Chris Jones comes free. That's not just a missed block. That's the cost of not having enough high-end talent across the interior. In the biggest game of the year, against the best defensive tackle on the planet, you can't afford replacement-level play. That's 3 seasons, 3 defining playoff exits, 1 common denominator. And now here we are again, hearing that the organization feels good about the offensive line as currently constructed. You can believe in your guys. You can value chemistry. But championship teams are ruthless about upgrading weaknesses. They don't let comfort override reality. The NFC is not getting easier. Seattle is physical up front. Philadelphia reloads every year. Dallas has pass rushers. The conference is deep, fast, and violent in the trenches. If the 49ers don't shift resources toward protecting Brock Purdy and solidifying the interior, they're betting that scheme can compensate for physical disadvantages. Sometimes it can. In January, usually it can't. And here's the thing. This doesn't require blowing up the entire roster. It requires urgency. It requires prioritizing offensive line early in the draft. It requires admitting that being solid isn't enough when you're chasing a Lombardi trophy. Let me ask you one final question. Will the 49ers actually fix the offensive line this offseason? Yes or no? Drop it in the comments. I want to see where the faithful stands on this. Because if nothing changes, nothing changes. And we are tired of watching the same movie end the same way. If you're riding with this channel, make sure you're subscribed. We're pushing toward 2,000 subscribers and building a real community of 49ers fans who care about championships, not comfort. Turn on notifications so you don't miss the next breakdown, especially as draft season heats up.